Hi, I'm Sarah Schatz, and you're listening to Kindle Curiosity, a podcast for curious souls where we explore the creative process. This podcast is powered by the Kindle community on Patreon to keep things advert-free. Take a seat by the fire, and let's welcome today's guest. Before we jump into today's podcast, I just have a couple little pieces of housekeeping. The first is that this recording was very long distance. It was from America to Norway, so we had a little bit of connection issues, so it's a little bit shorter than most because we spent some of the time repeating the same thing so the microphone could pick it up, and there's a little bit of interference and some kind of blipping in and out, so I'm sorry about that, but what she has to say is so great that I didn't want to cut those bits. I wanted to leave them in. So just a little bit of grace and understanding for that, and I'm trying to release my perfectionism, so this is an action that I can take. And I also wanted to let you know that this will be a fortnightly podcast, which means there'll be a new episode every other week. I'm trying to come out of this pattern of intense work and burnout and find something that's sustainable. So that really felt like the right pace to release the episodes for me. Also, I won't put this at the beginning of every podcast, but I did so much want to thank everyone for listening to the first couple of episodes. This has been a brain dream child of mine for several months, and it feels so good to have it out in the world. Podcasting can feel a little bit like shouting into the void, so a special thanks to those of you who have reached out to leave a comment or tagged me as you shared the podcast or sent me a message. It's so good to know that it's resonating with you. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would really help a lot if you leave a rating and review. That just helps other people to find the podcast. And right now, we don't have enough ratings to show up as a rated podcast. I think there have to be 5. So I know there's at least 1 because the review shows up. So it would only take 4 more of you. Okay, I think I've rambled enough for now. Let's get on to today's episode. Barbora Kurcova is a creative photographer and a kind, generous soul. She has an Instagram feed full of magic and whimsy, all created without the use of Photoshop. Barb, thanks for joining us all the way from Norway.
Oh, thanks for having me. What a fantastic introduction.
I knew I wanted to have you on the podcast right away because I love watching your Instagram stories and the behind the scenes, so I knew that you would be a great guest.
I really like to share those things as well.
Perfect. So let's dive right in and start by talking about what kindled your curiosity as a child.
When I was a little child, I was really curious since my parents, or I can remember. I know my mom told me the story that when I was about 1.5 years old, I found out how to get out of the baby cot. I just wiggled one of the rods, and I left the bed and I went off playing for hours silent. So I've been very curious since I was little, and I think it kind of stayed with me until today. I am still asking, but why, until I get the right answer.
That's so funny. Mom used to compare me to a little Houdini artist, so we must share that in common. I never really thought about the fact that it could be my curiosity that was driving me to escape, but I love that story. So were there any specific things you were interested in, like art or books?
I think I was interested in a lot of things, but when I was little, we didn't have a lot of money in the family, so I couldn't really go to many classes to try out. So I often started something, and then we didn't have money to continue. So I tried several music instruments. I was in a ceramics class, a drawing class, all the different things, and also all the after-school activities. So I really liked to try everything a little bit, but it was all somehow visually creative rather than the music. Music was more for fun. So I liked to draw. I liked to make collages. I had my little journal where I would write every day and maybe stick little pictures or draw something what happened to me in the day. I also had a huge notice board in my room where I would stuff different inspiring things. So the visual inspiration was always quite interesting and important for me since I was a little child.
So how did that kind of visual art and journaling lead into photography and the kind of work that you do now on Instagram?
I also liked photography already back then. I got a camera from my parents with the film inside, and I know I would waste all the photographs on capturing clouds and shadows and all the things I kind of like until today. So I tried little bits and there with photography with my parents' cameras when I was younger. And then I became a journalist because I thought that would be a creative job, but it wasn't really. In my professional job, I always did something kind of creative, but it never was enough for me. So I started to do something more after work. And that's where Instagram came to place, really, because I wanted to inspire people and I wanted to share my point of view, I guess. And it wasn't enough for me anymore just to keep it for myself. And I wanted to share it with other people. So that's where Instagram really started for me.
So let's get into talking about your creative process, and maybe let's start with talking about where you get your ideas.
That's a perfect question, which I never know how to answer, to be honest, because sometimes it just comes to you. But I think it's mostly because my brain works a lot like a sponge. I get often overwhelmed by my own brain because I can absorb a lot of things. And I think often it works like a cocktail, which creates a really good drink at the end. So sometimes the ideas just pop in my head because enough inputs got combined.
That's such a great way of describing it. Inspiration can be really hard to talk about, but I think my creative inspiration is very much the same. I'm not sure where the ideas come from sometimes, but they just kind of pop up like mushrooms after the rain. So how do you fill your creative well?
I really like to read a lot of interesting things from different fields. I like to look at different films. I like to look at different kind of arts or other people's photographies. I think every idea in general is just combination of what you have somehow seen or experienced before, because I don't believe that there is any original idea really. The things you put into it from your personality, it's the originality of it, but the ideas are just combination of all the other things. But if I would be a little bit practical, I think I get a lot of ideas from my everyday life and from the objects I see around me or some situations I see on the streets or in the films, which inspire me to create a little message in the tiny square on Instagram.
I agree. I think a lot of times when I get stuck, it's because I'm not getting out and exposing myself to different things. I'm too much in my routine and at my house and in front of my computer.
Yeah, definitely. And that also when I feel like I get stuck and the ideas are not coming or they are not good enough, the best is to just change the scenery. So I often go outside to the nature, or I go and sit in a cafe offline just with my journal. And maybe I'm just sketching or drawing something. And that often really helps.
And you talked about that in your newsletter this week, which is a really great newsletter.
Thank you.
And another thing that you talked about there was about when people don't think they're creative. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
It makes me really sad when people say that, because creativity, the definition is that you're creating something new out of nothing, kind of. So everyone is creative. For example, my boyfriend works as electrician and he thinks he's being creative as well because he has to find out the best solution for what he's doing to make it in the best looking way and the functional way in the same time. So I think every profession and everything we do is creative. Everyone is cooking dinners for their family or for themselves. That's being creative. As long as you are not following the recipe exactly, you are being creative. You're creating something new and different. So I think people are just often imagining creativity as something really unattainable, something artsy and just for a little group of people. But I think everyone is really creative.
I completely agree. I think as humans, we're constantly using our creativity, like you said, whether it's problem solving at work or cooking dinner for our families, and just not giving ourselves always credit for it. And I think when it comes to creating as art, there can be a little bit of a block. And I love how on your Instagram, your Insta stories, you're always talking about how anyone can do creative photography. So let's kind of jump into your process of how you make your photos for Instagram.
It all started with the release of Photoshop. I have nothing about using Photoshop if people have fun with it, but I think often it's a little bit of laziness in a way, because I think you could take it the way. You could go to the forest and take a picture of yourself there instead of downloading forest and photoshopping yourself in the picture. But I also could see that the illusion and the perspective is really popular on Instagram and people really like the little magic. So I tried to find the way how to create it old school, create it without using Photoshop. And then that's kind of how it started, because I just didn't want to be another one using Photoshop. And I said, no, I can do it without it. I can find a way how to make creative photographs anyway. So that's how I started to do all the creative portraits as well, and all the perspective photography. And it's really fun. It's really challenging, and you really have to use your brain, your logical part of the brain as well. So you're not only being all creative and artsy, but you have to think a little bit technical, because you have to set the camera right, you have to find the right angle, and so on. So I really like the challenge in doing that.
You also take really beautiful self-portraits, and you've talked somewhat on your blog about having the self-confidence to be in front of the camera and not just behind it. So do you have any tips for that for us here?
Yeah, of course. I would, to be honest, if you would tell me 1 year ago that I'm going to take portraits of myself and post them on Instagram, I would probably laugh at you, because I was not into all this selfie culture at all. I've never had that kind of Instagram either. But then I started to explore a little bit more, and I noticed that people really like to see the person behind the photos, and they like to see that you are a human. You are not a computer or a company. You are actual person like everyone else. So I started, and I tried first, the portraits where you can't really see my face, just to see that the person is there. And then I started to get a little bit of courage to show my full face. And then everything kind of changed when I shaved my head, because that really did something with my thinking, because I had quite a long hair before. And if I didn't feel like showing my face, I could just, put the curl here and there and hide behind the hair. But I didn't have any hair suddenly, and it felt so vulnerable, and I felt like naked in front of the camera just with my bare face. But then I realized, well, that's just the only face I've got. So that's just how it is. And I started to explore a little bit more and show a little bit more my face. But I think what's really important is that if you want to try, you shouldn't force yourself. Just because it's something which is popular or which is going to bring you likes or fame or whatever. I think you should just find your comfortable place to do it. I know there are many people which never show their face, but still show some part of their body, or show half of the face, or cover their face with flowers or something. And I think that can be a really good start for people to start exploring how do they feel. And what I really like about the self-portrait is that it's very intimate. You are being with yourself, so no one is watching you, and you know how you look the best, which is your best angle, and you can really take your time and find something which you are comfortable in. So I would definitely recommend to do it when you are home alone, or when you have a little while for yourself. Otherwise, you will be a little bit stressed, I think, and it won't be as enjoyable.
Brilliant. So maybe let's talk a bit more about Instagram and how your photography style has grown and changed since you started.
Yeah, sure. I had another Instagram profile before. I mentioned it many times, so I think everyone knows by now. I had around 5,000 followers, but the profile wasn't really about me that much, and I felt like it wasn't personal enough, and I felt really disconnected. So I just dropped it, and I started over And I had quite a difficult relationship before. And I don't want to go into too many details because we would be here for 2 hours. But I kind of lost my personality. When we split up, I didn't know who I was, what I wanted, what I liked. I had really problems to even decide what kind of lunch I want to eat. So the Instagram was kind of the way how to explore myself, find my identity and what I like. So I was really trying from the beginning to not copy anyone, not follow any trends, but just explore and find those pictures which really feels like it's me behind it. Like I look at them now 1 year later and I still love the picture because I know this was just me being creative, being in my best. So I think that's really important for me. And of course there are days when you look at the numbers or you just want to be like everyone else. I think even though everyone is very unique, sometimes you just want to go with the flow. And I think that's okay. And I think it's important just to accept it, that you are not going to produce amazing art every day and making creative portraits every day. That's not possible. Even though you would do it full time, I don't think it would be fun and it would be sustainable. So I think it's good to give yourself a little slack and just explore, really.
One more question about that before we kind of move on. You make a lot of your own photo props in your photos. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about that process.
I think it kind of started as because I just got really annoyed that people buy stuff just for Instagram. It's everyone's choice, really. I'm not judging anyone, but I found it so unnecessary. And more I started to get interested in sustainability and ethical fashion and our planet in general. I found it just so ridiculous that someone would buy outfit or whatever just for the photo and then you throw it away or just put it in the closet. So I started to explore a little bit. What can I do myself? And also, and the side of it was that I was really broke and I didn't have any money. So even though I would technically want to buy some props for myself, I just couldn't. I didn't have any money for that. So I started to look at things around me and started to use a lot of nature at first because that's like the easiest props, which is for free. Because you can bring a lot to your home and use it in your photographs throughout the season pretty much. So I started to use a lot of that. And then I just developed a little bit. And now I sometimes make more props for myself. Like now I made a cloud, which looks kind of realistic if you close one eye, out of a bubble foil and this kind of cotton you use for cleaning your face. It's really easy. I also try to paint a lot of props or use just different things. And lately I'm also trying to not just make props for making them, but for example, the other day I was painting because I really felt like doing something useless. But then the result was so pretty that I decided to use it for my photograph anyway. So I just think it's a little about being a bit flexible and being creative in another way, because we have so many things. You can borrow things from your friends. You can bring stuff from outside. And often I just keep, for example, different wrapping paper or different bits and bobs you get in the post, and then I just reuse it. So I have one drawer which is really full of crap, but it's the things with potential, which I think will have their time one day.
You've also been making some stop motion lately.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I actually tried it a couple of times. And first when I did was around Christmas time. And that one just went crazy. I think it has, as today, around 200,000 views, which is just insane compared to how many followers I have. But I think it was the right timing. It was before Christmas and it was stop motion to creatively wrap your presents. I think people really appreciate it in that time. But I really like the stop motion because it's like a next level, you know. I think once I'm this kind of restless person, so once I get kind of decent in something, I just need to develop somewhere else. Otherwise, I get bored really easily. And stop motion is really challenging. So I really love that. And when I really manage and when I nail the result, it's just the best feeling, because you really have to have a steady camera, because the camera can't move even 1 millimeter during the photo shoot, because you will see it. once you speed up all the pictures. And you have to have some sort of, I guess, like cinema, what is it called?
Cinematography, cinematic.
Yeah, cinematic. You need to have some kind of cinematic thinking because, you need to imagine the sequence or how is it going to look like, because sometimes you need to take more photographs so the movement is more fluid. And sometimes it's just enough with a couple of photographs because you want it to be more sharp and kind of magical. So I really like that, and I'm thinking I will do many more. And I'm just writing an article about it to help people with some basics and beginnings, because many people asks about it.
Perfect. So if that's out by the time this podcast episode is, I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes.
All right. Perfect.
So we talked about this a little bit before, but let's go a little bit deeper into things that inspire you. So maybe types of films or books.
Yeah, I really like different kind of films. I love films from Wes Anderson, like a Grand Budapest Hotel or Moonrise Kingdom. These films are so visually beautiful and inspiring, full of different colors and textures, and they're a bit quirky, so I really find a lot of inspiration there. And also, if you want to really extend your creative thinking a little bit, I think Japanese anime movies are amazing, because sometimes I'm just looking at them and thinking, how can anyone come up with this? Because it's just kind of beyond the borders of our imagination. So I really like that. And of course, Pinterest is a great inspiration, because it's a never-ending resource of different pictures and photographs. But it's a little bit tricky. I think once you are a photographer or a creative photographer, as I am, it's the best to find the inspiration somewhere else than the photographs, because often you unintentionally can start copying or emulating the photos you saw. Mm-hmm. So I find that when I get the inspiration, for example, from books, I really like Haruki Murakami. His books are amazing. Or Terry Pratchett, which is kind of a fantasy. Yeah, it's a fantasy world. You get kind of more your own ideas because you haven't seen the picture.
Yeah.
In a way. So I think if you are a writer, maybe it's best to look at the photographs, and that inspires you to write. And if you're a photographer, rather leave the photographs on the side and get inspired somewhere else. Well, that works for me.
I think that's brilliant. You have such a practical way of giving advice that I'm really curious to hear what you have to say for this next question. So people are usually asked how to become a professional at what they do, but what I like to ask my guest is this. If someone wanted to just dabble in creative photography, where would they start?
Well, I think the best way how to start is to take your camera, any kind of camera you have. You can take your phone. You can do so much with the phones these days because the cameras are amazing, and just take a lot of pictures. You know, it's really about the quantity at the beginning, because you learn so much by doing it. It's the best practice, in my opinion. So just go out and take your camera anywhere you go. Until even today, I carry my camera almost every day in my backpack just in case. But you can go to the forest, or you can go to the shopping mall, anything really which interests you. Because I think what's really important is to start seeing things through the camera lens, because it looks a little bit different. I can't really explain it, but I think the fact is that when you look at something with your eyes, you know that everything is three-dimensional. So you see things different. But on the photo, it kind of becomes two-dimensional in a way, flat. So everything looks a little bit different. And once you take a lot of photographs and start looking at things through the camera, you will find your angles, and you will find a way how to take better pictures, and how the light works, and all the little things. Because the camera work or the photography is it's really magical, and you can get better with just the little steps. But yeah, I think just doing it, and just start take actual regular pictures, regular photographs, and maybe just play with the light. Try to work what happens if you take the photo against sun, and what happens if the sun is behind you, and how this affects the photograph, because that gives you so much more knowledge. And then later, when you want to create some of the effects, you will know how to do it, and it will be a lot of fun, and you can really do whatever you want.
That's really great advice. I think when people want to start something new, sometimes they want to buy a new thing, kind of we talked about earlier a little bit, and they might think they don't have a good enough camera, but like you said, phone cameras are great now.
Yeah.
And that's a really great way to start.
Yeah. And there is also plenty of, to remember the name now, but there are many apps which are for free. And those apps allows you to have the same manual setting on your phone camera as you would do in an actual camera. So you can set the shutter speed and aperture and ISO, and you can start playing with manual setting even in your phone, which is amazing because you can get fantastic results just with your phone and simple apps.
That's fantastic. And maybe to people who are a little bit new to Instagram, I've heard you have some really great advice on connecting with people there. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
So when it comes to connecting on Instagram in general, I think it's one of the most important things, where it is one of the most important things for me. And I think it's something special about Instagram because you connect with other people through the visuals, through photographs. So before you even say hello to each other, you probably have something in common because they liked your photo or you liked their photo. So the whole scene is kind of set on a very nice level. So I think you can make a lot of meaningful, beautiful connections on Instagram. And I found my best friend on Instagram, which we have met in real life as well, and a lot of amazing friends as well. But I kind of requires a lot of courage in the same time, because if you are being authentic and you're being yourself and honest, then you can create the meaningful connections. But if you are pretending to be something else or someone else, not intentionally, maybe you just don't show all of you, which is okay, well then it might be more difficult to connect with the right people. Because I think in my personal Instagram journey, I'm being very honest and open, and I am of course I'm not sharing everything, no one does that, it's a curated life, but I am being 100% myself. I think if you meet me in real life, you will see that I'm totally the same person. So for me, it might be much easier to make friends on Instagram because I am me. I am the same person, and the Instagram I do is very personal. I think it really depends how much you want to show of yourself in the little squares. But anyway, I think the connections are really important, especially with all these self-doubt and people feeling like their pictures are not good enough and they don't get enough likes and yada yada, this whole story. If you have the meaningful connections, you always have so many people which come and support you. And when you don't post a couple of days, maybe they send you a message and ask you, are you all right? What's going on with you? And that's so amazing because you can really see that there are still good people out there in the world. So for me, the connections are really important. Maybe one of the most important things, actually, why I am doing Instagram in general. And the stories are, I think, one of the best ways how to show the life unscripted. If you really like to curate your gallery and you want to have all the pictures beautiful and everything just together, and you want to show maybe different part of you and have a little bit of relaxed creativity, I think stories are fantastic media how to do it, because you can just chat with people, you can just show them snippets of your life. I show a lot of my creative process because I like to share what I know with people, and I want to help them to be able to do it as well and to see that it's rather easy. So and I always get so many messages from people when I share something on stories, because I think because they see your face or they see the live action, they can connect much easier. And it's not really that hard. It's the same as the self-portraits. If you don't feel like showing your face, you can film yourself doing something with your hands. My first Instagram live was me just sitting there, not saying anything, making a Christmas wreath. And people loved it, and I got many comments and many people watched it. So it's just about those little things you want to just sneak in between the perfect photos.
So I think we already know the answer to this, but what is the best place to connect with you online?
Instagram, surprise. I think Instagram. I am there a lot. I try to answer all the messages. So her internet is my home, my internet home.
Perfect. And I will be sure to link to that and to your website because you have a fantastic newsletter with advice on creativity and photography and Instagram. And so are those the two best places to find you?
Yeah, definitely. And if it's something serious or you feel like you need more space to talk, you can always send me email. And the link for that is also on Instagram. So just don't be shy. I am just a regular person as you. So I love to chat with people.
Great. And thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Kindle Curiosity is funded entirely by supporters on Patreon. You can pledge as little as $1 a month to keep this podcast advert-free. Additional tiers unlock bonus rewards like extra podcast episodes, the Kindle Book Club, and our virtual maker gatherings. Learn more at kindlecuriosity.com or find me on Patreon as Sarah Schatz. If you'd like to support Kindle Curiosity without becoming a patron, you can subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Find all of the show notes from today at kindlecuriosity.com. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'd love to know what you think. You can find me on most social media as @SarahD.Schatz. Thanks for listening, and thanks especially to all of my patrons on Patreon. P.S. I'd love to know what's sparking your curiosity. Share your moments of creativity, exploration, and wonderment with #KindleCuriosity.